Please close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the exact sound of a heavy rotary phone dial clicking rapidly back into place. Or perhaps recall the sharp, sweet smell of freshly printed purple mimeograph paper handed out in your school classroom. Today, we are traveling back to the 1960s in America. We are going to explore 40 tiny, everyday details and rituals that only our specific generation truly remembers. These are the beautiful, simple fragments of our childhood that have quietly vanished from the modern world. And please stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will share is perhaps the most touching, a subtle, unspoken evening ritual that entirely defined the freedom of our youth. Before we begin our journey, let us pause and remember how time itself felt back then. In the 1960s, time moved at a completely different, much more deliberate pace. We lived without the constant rush and the endless instant gratification of today. Waiting was a natural, beautiful, and accepted part of daily life. We waited weeks for our precious photographs to be developed at the local pharmacy. We waited all year for our favorite holiday television specials to air on a single night. And we waited patiently by the front window for a best friend to walk down the street. Modern generations might look back and think we lived in a poorer world because we lacked smart devices and endless internet access. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Our lives were incredibly rich in genuine human connection. When you looked at someone, you truly saw them. When you listened, you heard every single word without the distraction of a glowing screen. We did not have virtual followers. We had real, dependable neighbors. We had open front porches, shared stories, and a profound, unshakable sense of belonging to our community. The true magic of that golden era was not in the physical things we owned, but in the profound sincerity of how we lived, how we waited, and how we loved. And now let us remember the careful, dedicated ritual of collecting S&H Green Stamps. Do you recall the exact texture of those little perforated squares? Every time our mothers went to the grocery store or the local gas station, they were handed a length of these precious stamps. Our job at the kitchen table was to lick them and press them neatly into the empty pages of the Savor books. The taste of that dry, sweet glue is something you never truly forget. It was an exercise in patience and family teamwork. The booklets themselves had a distinct, slightly musty paper smell that accumulated as they sat in the kitchen drawer for months. We would slowly flip through the thick, colorful redemption catalog, dreaming of a new toaster, a set of fine towels, or even a shiny new bicycle. Going to the Redemption Center downtown felt like stepping into a magical warehouse where our collective patience was finally rewarded. We did not just buy things instantly with a piece of plastic. We earned them through months of careful saving, turning everyday errands into a shared family goal. The feeling of handing over those perfectly filled books to the clerk gave us a profound sense of pride. Let us drift back to the kitchen and remember the pure mechanical joy of the aluminum ice cube tray. Before modern refrigerators dispensed crushed ice at the push of a button, making ice was a very physical, deliberate task. You would carefully fill the metal tray at the kitchen sink, trying desperately not to spill a drop of water on the linoleum floor as you walked it slowly back to the freezer compartment. But the true memory lies in the extraction process. You took that freezing metal tray out, and sometimes your damp fingers would briefly stick to the sides, leaving a tiny sting of cold. Then came the ritual of pulling the heavy center lever. You had to use real muscle to pull it back, followed by that loud, incredibly satisfying cracking sound as the internal metal grid broke the solid sheet of ice into jagged, imperfect cubes. Sometimes a rogue piece of ice would shoot out and slide across the floor, dropping those freezing, slightly metallic-tasting blocks into a tall glass of fresh, homemade lemonade on a sweltering July afternoon was a simple perfection that modern plastic trays could never replicate. Now, think about the complex social etiquette of the neighborhood party line. In many American homes during the 1960s, a telephone line was not a private luxury. It was a communal utility shared with 2, 3, or even 4 other families on the same street. We had to memorize our specific ring pattern, perhaps 2 short rings and a long one, to know the incoming call was actually for us. If you picked up the heavy receiver to make an outgoing call, you might immediately hear the soft breathing or the hushed, intimate gossip of your neighbors already on the line. You would have to quietly clear your throat, apologize, and gently place the receiver back in its cradle so you would not eavesdrop on their private conversation. It taught us patience, immense respect for privacy, and the unwritten rules of community sharing. Sometimes, in a true emergency, you had to politely interrupt and ask a neighbor to hang up the phone. Furthermore, the telephone was physically tied to the wall by a coiled cord. You stood there, anchored in the hallway, fully present in the conversation, sharing a connection with the world around you that demanded your complete attention. Let us step out onto the early morning porch and recall the arrival of the milkman. Long before giant plastic jugs filled supermarket aisles, milk was delivered right to our doorsteps in thick, heavy glass bottles. You could hear the familiar rumble of the delivery truck pulling up in the quiet dawn, followed by the distinctive clinking sound of thick glass against the metal wire carrier as the delivery man walked up the driveway. The milkman knew our families, knew our weekly order by heart, and often left a friendly handwritten note on the stoop. In the freezing winter months, if we did not wake up early enough to bring the bottles inside, the cream at the top would freeze solid and push the little paper cap an inch or 2 above the rim, looking like a tiny white hat. Pushing your thumb firmly through that paper cap and pouring that fresh, rich milk over your morning bowl of cornflakes was a daily blessing. When the bottles were completely empty, we diligently rinsed them out in the sink and set them back on the porch for the next morning. It was a perfect cycle of trust, sustainability, and local community reliance that silently anchored the neighborhood together. Think back to the rhythmic mechanical heartbeat of laundry day with a wringer washing machine. It was usually stationed in the damp basement or on a covered back porch. Operating this machine was not a passive chore. It required constant attention and physical labor. You had to carefully feed the soaking wet, heavy cotton clothes through the 2 rolling cylinders to physically squeeze out the excess water. You stood there and watched the soapy water cascade back down into the basin, always making absolutely sure your fingers or loose hair did not get caught in the relentless, dangerous grip of the wringer. The smell of strong, powdered detergent, like Rinso or Tide, filled the humid basement air with a distinct chemical cleanliness. After surviving the wringer, the heavy, damp clothes were carried outside in large wicker baskets to be hung on the long clotheslines stretched across the backyard. Pinning those heavy white cotton sheets to the rope with smooth, spring-loaded wooden clothespins, watching them snap and billow violently in the fresh afternoon breeze, was a chore that took hours, but it gave the fabric a crisp, incredibly fresh, sun-baked fragrance that no modern fabric softener can mimic. Let us return to the heavy, substantial feel of the rotary telephone. It was not just a communication device. It was a heavy piece of solid furniture, often in deep black, harvest gold, or a striking avocado green. The physical act of dialing a phone number required intention and time. You placed your index finger into the designated plastic hole, dragged the circular dial all the way around to the curved metal finger stop, and gracefully released it. The sound it made, that rapid mechanical whirring and clicking as it spun back into its original resting place, is deeply etched into our collective minds. If you messed up just one single number at the very end of the sequence, there was no backspace button. You had to hang up the receiver and start the entire tedious process all over again. And then there was the famous coiled cord. Teenagers talking to their high school sweethearts would stretch that cord to its absolute physical limits, pulling it tightly around door frames and into closets just to secure a tiny sliver of privacy. Untangling it, letting the heavy receiver dangle and spin rapidly in the air until the cord hung perfectly straight again, was a strangely therapeutic ritual of our youth. And now, let us remember the exhilarating, incredibly bumpy ride of metal roller skates. These were not the smooth, soft, inline skates of today. These were heavy metal contraptions that you had to manually attach to the bottom of your everyday leather sneakers. You used a special heavy metal skate key to widen the front clamps, sliding your shoe into the base, and then violently cranking the key until the metal grips bit down hard and securely on the rubber soles of your shoes. You would then tie the worn, thin leather straps tightly around your ankles, praying that they would hold firm during your neighborhood adventures. Then came the unmistakable, completely deafening roar of solid metal wheels rolling rapidly over uneven concrete sidewalks. Every single crack in the pavement sent a sharp, jarring vibration straight up through your legs and directly into your teeth. We lost those expressive skate keys countless times, eventually learning to wear them on shoestrings tied tightly around our necks like magical amulets. We skated up and down the block for hours until our ankles were bruised, our knees were heavily scraped, and the streetlights began to flicker on. We were entirely free and overwhelmingly happy. Let us wander back into the classrooms of our childhood and breathe in the unforgettable scent of the mimeograph machine. Whenever a teacher announced a pop quiz or handed out a new reading assignment, the pages were often fresh from the spirit duplicator in the main school office. The paper felt slightly cool and damp to the touch, and the text was printed in a distinct, slightly blurry purple ink. But the most universal reaction, something every single child did instinctively without ever being taught, was to lift that fresh piece of paper directly to their nose and inhale as deeply as possible. The sweet, sharp, highly chemical aroma of the duplicating fluid was absolutely intoxicating and completely unforgettable. It is a powerful sensory memory that instantly transports us back to rows of heavy wooden desks with attached chairs, chalk dust floating beautifully in the afternoon sunlight, and the innocent fluttering anxiety of an upcoming spelling test. We would excitedly compare the darkness of the purple ink on our papers. That purple ink inevitably smeared onto the sides of our hands, permanently marking us as participants in a shared, completely analog educational experience. Do you remember the magic and the slight physical danger of taking photographs indoors with a Kodak Instamatic camera. Before our modern phones could silently capture thousands of digital images in the dark, capturing a moment inside the house required a flash cube. You would start by snapping this clear plastic cube directly onto the top mechanism of the camera. When you firmly pressed the shutter button, the internal bulb would explode with a blinding, terrifyingly bright burst of light, accompanied by a sharp, highly distinct, sizzling pop that echoed in the quiet living room. The cube would then automatically rotate with a mechanical click, readying the next fresh bulb for the next photograph. After taking exactly 4 pictures, the entire cube was spent and completely useless. If you were impatient and tried to pull it off the camera too quickly, the blistering hot plastic would severely burn your fingers, teaching you a harsh lesson in patience. We had to wait for it to cool down before tossing it into the kitchen trash can. Because every single photograph cost real money to develop at the local pharmacy, we posed carefully, smiled genuinely, and waited 2 agonizing weeks to see the result. Now think about the absolute finality of late-night television in the 1960s. Today, broadcasting is a relentless, endless stream of 24-hour content designed to keep you awake. But back then, television actually went to sleep. If you managed to stay up late enough on a weekend, the final scheduled program would actually end. A very solemn, deep-voiced television announcer would come on screen to wish the local community a safe and peaceful good night. Then the station would invariably play a majestic rendition of the national anthem, often accompanied by black and white footage of a waving American flag, majestic landscapes, or fighter jets soaring proudly through the cloudy sky. And then the television programming just completely stopped. The glowing screen would immediately switch to the famous Indian head test pattern, or a rigid series of colorful vertical bars, emitting a loud, continuous, highly irritating, high-pitched tone. Eventually, the screen dissolved into pure, hissing visual snow and loud audio static. There was a profound, deeply reassuring comfort in that strict boundary. It was a clear signal from the adult world that the day was truly over. Let us drift back to those warm summer Friday nights at the local drive-in movie theater. It was a major event for the entire family. Our parents would pop a huge paper grocery bag full of popcorn at home to save money, and we would all pile into the sprawling, unair-conditioned station wagon or large American sedan. We children were often already dressed comfortably in our pajamas to make the late-night transition to bed much easier. Dad would slowly pull the heavy car up over the small dirt mounds to perfectly angle the large windshield toward the massive, towering outdoor movie screen. Then came the very specific ritual of the window speaker. He would roll down the heavy glass window, reach out to grab the bulky gray metal speaker from its resting post, and hook it securely onto the top of the glass. The sound that came out of it was always a bit tinny and highly distorted, echoing faintly across the vast, dark gravel lot filled with hundreds of other cars. We would light green, smoky, spiraled mosquito coils on the dashboard to keep the relentless summer bugs away. Falling asleep in the spacious back seat to the muffled sounds of a Hollywood soundtrack remains one of the purest feelings of childhood security. Remember the pure, unadulterated joy of buying an icy glass bottle of soda from a heavy metal vending machine at the local gas station. These machines did not gently drop a thin plastic bottle into a padded bin. They were sturdy, heavily insulated, refrigerated horizontal chests that sat prominently outside the service station doors. You would slide a heavy, genuine silver coin, perhaps a dime or a quarter, into the narrow slot, and hear it loudly clunk all the way down into the dark belly of the machine. Then you would grasp the freezing glass neck of your chosen bottle, whether it was a classic Coca-Cola, a bright orange knee-high, or a sweet Royal Crown, and manually drag it through the complex metal tracks until it reached the final release gate. Pulling it up and out required a satisfying, forceful tug. Then you firmly pressed the metal bottle cap against the heavy iron opener permanently bolted to the side of the machine, letting the cap fall into the hidden tray below. The immediate hiss of the carbonation, the icy cold glass sweating profusely in your warm hand, and the sharp, burning bite of real cane sugar soda on your tongue was the ultimate reward on a blazing summer afternoon. And now let us recall the great American road trips, specifically the unforgettable experience of riding in the way back of a giant wood-paneled station wagon. In the 1960s, the concept of mandatory seatbelts was practically non-existent, and child safety seats were completely unheard of. The back of the wagon was a vast, open playground of flat, ribbed vinyl that folded down to create a massive floor. On long cross-country trips to visit distant grandparents, we children would fiercely claim this expansive territory as our own private kingdom. We would lay out our sleeping bags, play endless rounds of the license plate game, read comic books, and literally slide from one side of the massive car to the other every time our father took a sharp turn. The distinct smell of hot vinyl baking fiercely in the afternoon sun was overpowering and completely intoxicating. Sometimes Dad would roll down the rear window just an inch using the dashboard switch, and the heavy exhaust fumes would magically curl right into the back cabin. It was incredibly dangerous by today's strict safety standards, certainly, but to us, it was a joyous kingdom of absolute freedom on the great open highway. Think back to the futuristic excitement of the frozen TV dinner. When our mothers needed a rare, highly deserved night off from cooking a large family meal, the sudden appearance of those flat, colorful, rectangular cardboard boxes was a genuine cause for childhood celebration. We would carefully peel back the thick aluminum foil cover just slightly at the corners to let the steam escape, and slide them directly into the roaring hot oven. The microwave did not exist in our kitchens yet. Cooking these frozen blocks took actual time and immense patience. When they finally emerged, the foil was dangerously hot to the touch. We would quickly set them up on rickety, folding metal TV trays in the cozy living room, a very rare and special treat to eat dinner while watching the Ed Sullivan Show or Bonanza. The stamped metal compartments kept every single food item strictly separated. You had your thin Salisbury steak drowning in salty brown gravy, a scoop of intensely yellow corn, perhaps some watery mashed potatoes, and the absolute highlight, the boiling hot, thick fruit cobbler in the top corner. Eating that scalding cherry or apple dessert felt like partaking in the grand, modern progress of the 20th century. Let us quietly remember the secretive, intimate magic of the pocket transistor radio. For teenagers growing up in the 1960s, this little, fragile plastic box was our private, highly treasured lifeline to a wider, much more exciting world. It usually came with a single, highly uncomfortable, hard white plastic earpiece attached to a thin, easily tangled wire. At night, long after our strict parents told us to turn off the lights and go to sleep, we would hide the small radio deep under our pillows. We would slowly, agonizingly, turned the tiny, stiff plastic tuning wheel, navigating carefully through the thick, crackling static of the AM radio band. We were desperately trying to find a distant rock and roll station broadcasting from hundreds of miles away, or perhaps to listen to the fading, crackling broadcast of a late-night baseball game. The tiny, glowing red indicator light was the only source of illumination in the pitch-dark room. We felt like secretive spies intercepting highly coded messages. That tiny, tinny, deeply distorted voice whispering directly into our ears made us feel deeply connected to a massive, invisible community of young dreamers doing the exact same thing. Do you recall the exceptional service and human interaction at the local neighborhood gas station? Pulling up to the fuel pumps was an entirely different, highly dignified experience back then. Before you even brought your heavy American sedan to a full stop, the thick rubber tires would roll heavily over a thick black air hose laid across the concrete, instantly triggering a sharp, clear ding-ding bell inside the mechanic's garage. Instantly, a professional attendant wearing a neat, clean uniform with a customized embroidered name patch would jog happily out to your window. You literally never had to step out of the car into the weather. You would simply roll down the window and ask them to fill it up with regular. As the cheap gasoline flowed, the attendant would grab a soapy squeegee and thoroughly wash the dead bugs off your large windshield. They would then lift the incredibly heavy steel hood, check the dark oil levels with an oily rag, and make sure your tires were properly inflated for a safe trip. You paid them directly with physical cash right through the window. It was a wonderful time of immense pride in daily work and genuine, polite customer service that made the community feel like family. Let us journey back to the noisy school cafeteria and remember the heavy sensory experience of the classic metal lunchbox. Every September, right before the school year started, picking out a brand new lunchbox at the local department store was a major, highly stressful childhood decision. Whether it was brightly adorned with the characters from the Flintstones, Bonanza, or the Jetsons, the box was a very public extension of your personal identity. The heavy metal latch made a loud, hollow clatter when you snapped it open on the cafeteria table. Inside sat the true treasure, and simultaneously the true hazard of the day. The matching metal thermos containing a highly delicate, fragile glass vacuum liner. Your mother would lovingly fill it with steaming hot tomato soup or ice-cold whole milk. The absolute ultimate childhood tragedy was accidentally dropping that metal lunchbox on the hard, unforgiving playground asphalt. You would immediately hear the sickening, muffled crunch of breaking glass from inside. Opening it up to find the glass liner completely shattered into 1,000 dangerous pieces, thoroughly drowning your sandwich in warm soup, was a tragic rite of passage we all survived. Now think about the lost art of the door-to-door salesperson, specifically the Fuller Brush Man, or the glamorous Avon lady. In the quiet suburban neighborhoods of the 1960s, a sudden knock on the front door during the middle of the afternoon was not a nuisance or a threat. It was a highly anticipated social event. Mothers would warmly welcome these impeccably well-dressed, incredibly polite traveling representatives into the formal living room, often offering them a fresh cup of coffee and a slice of cake. The Fuller Brush Man would grandly open his magical, heavy leather sample case, revealing an incredible array of sturdy wooden hairbrushes and miraculous household supplies, always generously leaving behind a complimentary handy brush. The Avon lady, on the other hand, brought a touch of high society directly to the isolated suburbs. We young children would sit quietly on the carpeted floor, utterly mesmerized by the tiny, perfectly formed sample tubes of bright red lipstick and the miniature glass vials of perfume, wonderfully shaped like wild animals. This was not a cold, anonymous online transaction. It was a deeply personal neighborhood social call, firmly built on steady eye contact and genuine trust. Let us remember the pure, unadulterated anticipation that arrived in the physical mail just before the holidays. The arrival of the massive Sears Wish Book or the gigantic J.C. Penney Christmas catalog. These incredibly thick, heavy paperbacks were the absolute ultimate source of childhood dreaming and wild imagination. As soon as the neighborhood postman dropped it heavily into the metal mailbox, a fierce, highly vocal negotiation began among siblings over who legally got to look at it first. We would literally spend hours lying flat on our stomachs on the itchy living room rug, rapidly flipping through hundreds of glossy, brightly colored pages. We enthusiastically used heavy black markers or bright red ink pens to boldly circle the exact, specific toys we desperately wanted for the holidays. We circled die-cast metal cars, massive electric model train sets, highly intricate wooden dollhouses, and complex chemistry sets. We did not have endless internet browsing. Our entire universe of desire was securely contained within those heavy-bound pages. Leaving the heavily marked, dog-eared catalog strategically open on the kitchen counter for our parents to accidentally discover was our favorite strategic maneuver. And finally, let us return to the most profound, beautiful, and unspoken ritual of our youth. In the 1960s, children roamed the neighborhood with absolute, wild, unstructured freedom. We built complex wooden forts in the dense woods, rode our heavy metal bicycles miles away from home without a single thought of wearing safety helmets, and played pickup games of baseball in the empty dirt lots until the red clay permanently stained our pants. We did not carry mobile phones, and very few of us owned digital watches to track the passing hour. We had a universal, entirely undeniable signal to guide us: the magical flickering on of the tall neighborhood streetlights. As the hot summer sun began to dip slowly below the horizon, casting incredibly long, golden shadows across the cooling pavement, you would pause and wait for that soft, electrical hum. The very moment the large glass bulb buzzed loudly to life and glowed a pale yellow against the dark twilight sky, the game abruptly ended. A loud chorus of wooden screen doors slamming echoed down the block as every single child instinctively sprinted toward home for a hot dinner. It was a beautiful, invisible tether that connected us to our loving families. As we look back on these 40 tiny, beautiful fragments of the 1960s, we realize something incredibly profound. We are not just missing the heavy rotary phones, the clinking glass milk bottles, or the loud metal roller skates. We are grieving the loss of our youth, and the loss of a time when the world felt smaller, safer, and deeply, genuinely connected. We miss the comforting feeling of time moving slowly, allowing us to truly appreciate the people standing right in front of us. Our generation built the foundation of the world today, but we carry the quiet, secret knowledge of how remarkably beautiful yesterday truly was. If these vivid memories brought a warm, nostalgic smile to your face, please subscribe to our channel and like this video so we can continue preserving our shared, beautiful history together. And now, I would love to hear from you. Which of these lost everyday rituals do you miss the absolute most? Or what special, specific memory from the 1960s would you add to this list? Please tell your personal story in the comments below. Your beautiful memories are far too precious to ever be forgotten.